People don't like being lied to or misled. It's part of human nature, after all. People don't like to be manipulated most of the time, and when we try to have trust in people who have some level of authority in what we consume, it can be hard to maintain that trust. It gets even worse when your feelings get downplayed by others. Time and time again, a trend that keeps on happening more and more of people being misled by advertising and then being told that any issues they have don't matter. It's dehumanizing, and it's something that happens again and again, especially in today's culture. Hi, I'm MangaKamen, and today we're talking about subversion of expectations. It's become a common trend in today's media, and frankly speaking, some people aren't a fan of it. Unfortunately, I myself have become quite jaded to the concept, especially when it's done in some underhanded methods to get people interested in your product. What do I mean exactly? Well, let's use the latest example. Scott Pilgrim takes off. Manga's gonna spoil the new show that just came out. I literally started this video off with a spoiler warning before I spoke up. Shut up. Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is a pseudo-sequel/alternate universe of the original comic, where Scott Pilgrim is supposedly killed off in the first episode, and Ramona is propelled into searching for him, because he was actually teleported through a vegan warp hole. I realize for those who aren't familiar with the series that sounded weird, just roll with it please. The animation is crisp, the voice acting is
I forbid you from dating her, Scott Pilgrim!
decent, and the characterization for the characters who are basically the side cast do get a lot more exposure and development. More notably, Ramona's evil exes all seem to get redemption of some sort, although the twins do get shafted. If I had to give a bit of criticism for the series, it lacks the comedic charm that other iterations have. There are jokes that are familiar if you watched the live action film or read the comic, which if this were a straight up adaptation I wouldn't have an issue with, but when it's used in a sequel or alternate universe, it doesn't have that same punch. Then there's the pacing. I understand the whole trope of manic pixie girls where Ramona basically created the whole trope, but it seems odd that a person who is willing to dump 7 other people and immediately in episode 3 during the fight with Roxy essentially completes Ramona's character development, and it made the plot predictable as Ramona's gonna do is help the rest of her evil exes get a sort of redemption. I don't know, it just feels a bit too fast to do that, and as a result it doesn't really make Ramona that interesting of a main character after that. At least on the development side, since she's already figured out, oh shit, I'm a terrible person. If there's one more thing, you need to understand that this show does require people to at least understand the actual main story of the comics or movie to understand the character's baseline. The show assumes you've seen either the movie or the comics, so if you're not familiar with the series, I wouldn't recommend it. Then again, all of this is if you had to press me on finding negatives with the show. I do admit that on its own, the series is actually entertaining, even if I'm not a full-blown fan of Scott Pilgrim. I'm not saying it's bad, just didn't click with me fully. The game was fire though. Damn that music track. And I'm glad they brought back the musicians for the game for this. So why am I bringing up this series? Well, there's a debate about how the expectations for the show are going to be more of a focus on the actual original story of the comics. Really, the adaptations we got are the live action movie and the game, with the latter apparently having some issues with the Steam edition, so good luck with that. And if you go to an upload of Scott Pilgrim versus the animation, the Adult Swim short, a video with over 7 million views and over 240k likes, it's filled with the brim of comments saying they want a full-blown animated adaptation of the comic with this art style. And when you look at trailers for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off, it really gives the vibe that this would be a direct adaptation of the comics. Some would consider that to be a bait and switch, and I do have to agree that it is. Granted, I'd be more pressed to put this onto the marketing department of Netflix. It's not like these idiots haven't done stupid shit before, although considering some interviews I've seen, it sounds like it's more on the writers too. But people have been taking this opportunity to argue for and against this choice, with some people dismissing those who feel like they were misled and others saying things like Scott Pilgrim dies in the beginning when no, he doesn't. The entire plot is that Ramona finds out that he's alive and trying to find him. Even if you were to say that the expectations fall onto the audience, promotional material certainly didn't help in that regard. Now, if the show was upfront about being more focused on Ramona, a character from my understanding is a highly loved by people in the fandom, it would still be watched. You see, you need to ask questions about why this was done and what were the goals of it. I want to make it clear that I don't think the creator intended any harm, although reading an interview it's obvious that the plan was from the get-go.
The only time it rereads what's already been done is in the first episode, which is this lovely adaptation of text played straight. Was it always sort of planned to be this sincere mislead before pulling out of the rug underneath everyone watching right before the second episode begins? Yeah, I jokingly call it a fake pilot.
It's fine if the creator wanted to go into a more original direction. I'm not going to dictate what a creator can and can't do with their work. However, when you make a product like this, there will be expectations, especially with how the product is marketed, and people are allowed to not support that. If I paid someone for a first edition signed copy of the Blue Eyes White Dragon card signed by the late Kazuki Takahashi, and instead instead you gave me a dark magician with his signature, sure, I'll be happy with that, but I'll still be mad because I paid for the blue eyes. If it wasn't bad enough, imagine being told that your concerns or disappointment for how a show didn't go doesn't matter. Now, I do agree that the advertisement doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things, but this isn't the first time that something like this has happened, where there was a false advertisement made to sell people on things. Like, let's talk about this.
What the hell are you doing here?
I think I'd let you do this on your own.
You think I'd let you do this on your own?
The Last of Us 2. Such a garbage fire of a game. This sort of thing was done to hide the fact that early in the game, Joel gets killed off.
Someone confronts you, brain them, like so.
Hey, I'm talking to you.
Using the X button.
What's an X?
I'll never get tired of making that reference. Even though that scene was edited in promo material to showcase the opposite. While I'm not saying that Scott Pilgrim did that, cause this is deliberately changing an element to lie to your audience, especially with the main character of the first game, it's still an example of this happening. So when this does happen, there's going to be a subsect of fans who will love and hate this decision. Now you have to consider expectations. Even if a product was done well, people have gotten burned many times. I can recall back when Final Fantasy VII Remake was released, and while the game in and of itself was a fine game, save for some issues like have you seen these backgrounds and the frickin' DLC practices? Sorry, wrong video script. Anyway, one of the biggest demands for Final Fantasy VII was for it to be remastered onto the current gen hardware, especially when the PS3 tech demo came out and people again left comment after comment expressing their interest in playing Final Fantasy VII with the powerful graphics. And back in 2015, when the official trailer for the game released, people were stoked for this. When more trailers came out and the iconic bosses and scenes from the original game were shown in HD graphics, people were stoked. People were excited. And when the remake landed, it turned out not to be what people wanted. Well, the remake has become divisive for a reason, especially when it became a bit more of a weird amalgamation with the Wisps essentially trying to keep the characters on the original plot. The point is, when you set up expectations like this, you're gonna get backlash, to the point where some people will refuse to engage with the actual products in the future because this has been a reoccurring trend for media for a while. And again, going back to Scott Pilgrim, a lot of people did want an actual animated adaptation of the comics. Especially from my understanding, the film doesn't do the source material justice because it's to cram a lot of material into a feature-length film.
This is the modern-day equivalent to the Metal Gear Solid 2 Raiden twist down to the exact fan reaction to the twist and everything.
Oh boy, no, it's really not. Like, I'll admit the reaction is, but this ignores a lot of nuance to it. First off, Metal Gear Solid 2 wasn't teased as an adaptation of the first. Snake is still playable in the game for the first hour or so. Afterwards, he becomes a mentor figure, while meanwhile Scott is removed for half the plot. The other two biggest issues, though, are 1. Raiden's development wasn't hinged on the main character being removed to happen, and 2. Raiden was meant to be a poster child of the new age of child soldiers who fell short of the ideal that was Snake. Raiden wasn't glorified as Snake's replacement, he was more of a tragic figure brought about by the same world that produced Snake. Plus, there was respect and acceptance for the old, not thinly veiled disdain like so many modern remakes, which unfortunately is something that can be said is present Scott Pilgrim takes off, especially with the creator saying as such that Scott's a bad guy, even though the original material made it clear he was. Especially with his friend saying, Scott Pilgrim, you're dating a 17-year-old. Again, I agree the reaction was similar, but to say that these are equivalents to each other ignores the nuance and the blatant differences between the two situations, and the fact that people are hand-waving those who want an anime adaptation kind of throws a wrench in the writing that Scott Pilgrim takes off to establish. If you're not aware, early in the series, Ramona fights against Roxy, and Ramona learns that because she basically just left her exes in the dust and not considered their feelings on the matter, she was the one who created the bad guys of the series. You know, showing empathy to people and not ignoring their issues and problems. It's kind of a trait that people on the internet seem to have forgotten about. There have been countless examples where the main characters of the respective series will get killed off, removed, or replaced. It's been a rising trend. Masters of the Universe, The Last of Us 2, hell, even games like Bayonetta 3 and Danganronpa V3 had similar issues too. Oh, and let's not forget about the infamous Star Wars sequel series that happened. The point that I'm making here is that there are people who are tired of bait and switch, and being told that your frustrations don't matter is an issue that I am getting tired of. It's on the same level as being told world, you just didn't get it when you don't like the popular thing. On the other side of that coin, however, people who refuse to watch the show even past the first episode really shouldn't be assuming aspects of the show are games. It's all fine and dandy if you want to drop something if the advertising you were presented with didn't click with you, but if you do, you really can't make claims about the product. I want to make it clear that I have issues with both sides of this kind of debate, and at the very least in this instance, I can understand both perspectives, which is something that a lot of people have issue with, and again, misses out on the points that is made in Scott Pilgrim takes off. I realize we've been in a much more polarizing time, where if you don't hold the correct opinion on things, then you're seen as the enemy. Or if you want to see both sides of an argument like I am, you get called a fence sitter. And unfortunately, both of these would be met with angry idiots. And my response would be, will you clam up? There happens to be a particular behavior on the internet, as it were, and it's been done for a lot of different fandoms that people will get on your case for not holding the exact same opinion as you on a piece of media. Or anything nowadays, really. It feels like they just can't be okay with their own opinions, and they need everyone to validate their own perspective. It's almost a bit insecure when you really think about it and how they dismiss or even get on the case of people who don't share their experience. And it ties back to the situation here. I get that people want to have a faithful adaptation to the Scott Pilgrim comics, and if this sequel wasn't what they were looking for, that's fine. What isn't is if they spread misinformation about the series if they drop it before even giving it a chance. Likewise, if you enjoyed the Scott Pilgrim Takes Off show, that's great. I understand the need for something new to be added to the mix, especially considering that the series has some gaps between releases of material. The issue is ignoring that there were people who did want a straight-up adaptation of the work, and didn't care for the advertisement pulling a bait-and-switch. Whichever side you stand on, I feel as though instantly invalidating other people's thoughts, likes, dislikes, and concerns isn't going to make the situation better. All it's going to do is push people back into their corners of the internet, and animosity will increase. But those are just my thoughts. If you want my recommendation for the Scott Pilgrim show, if you're not familiar with the series, you're better off reading the comics or watching the movie first, then getting into the new show. On a side note, they totally should have named it Scott Pilgrim New Game Plus, then it would have shown that, oh, there's going to be additions to the original story. Yay! Oh well, whatever. Missed opportunity if you ask me. I'm MangaKamen, and thanks for listening to my rambles. Bye bye!